This is Charlie. He was just born. These are his parents, Jenny and Greg. In 20 years, Greg will be dead, but Charlie doesn't know that yet. Charlie doesn't know anything yet. He's just a baby. This is where Charlie grew up. His brother Jeff, sister Meg, their dog Louie, and the TV room where his dad hid these, some of the tackiest video pornography the 1980s had to offer.
If you want to know where the tapes were, you always had to look up in the air ducts.
Above the TV, and it was very obvious where these things were, and also compounded by the fact that he seldomly put them away. He had a lot of weird stuff.
Greg will be dead in 10 years, but Charlie still doesn't know that yet. This is Charlie's first project from film school. Evidently, he loaded the camera wrong, so the footage came out like this. So he never showed his dad. Greg will be dead in 1 year, but Charlie still doesn't know. Charlie has a ticket to see his favorite band. It's the same day that his dad tells him he's gotten a diagnosis, but he insists that Charlie go to the concert and not to worry. So Charlie isn't worried. He doesn't even know what malignant means. Then, just before Greg's 52nd birthday,
Charlie, are you there?
Charlie's mom calls to tell him that his dad has been hospitalized and is basically comatose. She explains as delicately as she can.
This is to the end.
At his hospital bed, Charlie thinks his dad gives him a smile. Greg can't speak anymore, so they sit in silence. In truth, this is not so different from when Greg was healthy. They didn't agree on much, and so they never really spent time together. But Charlie was waiting for the moment when they could see each other as adults. He knew that was when the strange distance he felt between them would finally close. But then, this is Charlie's dad today. He's been dead for 9 years. In the aftermath, a life's worth of weird stuff is left behind. Stuff that Charlie hoped might explain why his dad was the way he was. Like maybe if Charlie looked hard enough, he could bring him back from the dead. At least long enough to understand who he really was. So it's a pretty stupid plan, but this is him trying anyway. Gregory Allen Tyrrell was born November 14th, 1956 in Hamilton, Ontario. Parents Dale and Stan. Along with Greg, they'd all die within a year of each other. Dale was the last holdout. Greg was a police officer. He'd work long shifts an hour from home, but it was a job he kept pretty tight-lipped about.
Dad never talked about work with me.
No, never.
There wasn't anything that was glorified or glamorized. It was work, and work stayed at work.
Okay, being a cop just paid the bills. So what did Greg choose to do? Well, he flew airplanes in his spare time. He'd often drag Charlie to airstrips on weekends, but always ended up chatting with the other pilots for hours while Charlie, bored out of his mind, would leave to wait in the car.
First off, it was shut up and deal with it. I will just be there for a minute, which ended up being like 4 to 8 hours.
In some rat hole boring airfield in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, southern Ontario.
He fixed planes, too. He loved fixing things. He left behind a junkyard of tools, and their house was in a constant state of renovation, right up until his death. But what did any of this mean?
I think part of it was he always felt like he could do it better, and all he needed was just a weekend to hammer it out.
And this is their not done yet kitchen. 12 years in the making this. This is their front hallway. What a vast improvement. It's actually quite nice.
He did great work, especially his trim, and people were always complimenting him on that.
I do nice trim work, don't I?
He was pathologically protective of his stuff. Anything misused, misplaced, or presumably used in a movie would make him erupt.
My favorite story was the time he lost his keys.
Starts tearing apart the house,
kids have lost my keys.
Yelling and blaming everybody else.
It's like once it erupted, it just flowed.
And in his way, he didn't really come around to apologize.
It's kind of like he was sorry, but he wasn't sorry.
So far, this is going very badly. It looks like everything in this pile is just as elusive as Greg was. It's just trivia. Greg was hard to live with. Greg had a volatile temper. So what? Unexamined for all these years, this stuff could have hidden anything. Revelations, answers, catharsis. Examined, it's looking more and more like a big pile of nothing. And he's gone all the way from birth certificate to cancer diagnosis. The doctors told Greg that the most common causes of this kind of cancer were smoking, drinking, and stress. Greg didn't smoke, and he didn't drink. They nicknamed the tumor Dale. So maybe Charlie's been looking in the wrong place. Dale threw cocktail parties. Stan was a pilot. On the surface, they looked like a pretty typical, well-adjusted family. This was their house, a monument to a respectable brand of normalcy. Dale's cocktail parties were showcases. Her kids were props. On Christmas mornings, she would march them downstairs in matching uniforms and make them write long thank you cards immediately after every gift was unwrapped, to Santa, every single time.
I think Dad's childhood was something he was just trying to get through.
He never really shared any fond memories of his mother at all.
You know how pictures make it look like a happy family? It's such a lie. She was always angry with them. But Dale ran that household, and she ran it like it was a ship.
Greg had a speech impediment back then. Dale would reluctantly drive him to corrective lessons, bullying him the whole time about what a burden he was on her.
Your dad was definitely scarred by his childhood. Your dad and his brothers didn't grow up, didn't have a childhood. They survived the same situation.
Decades later, nothing had changed. Charlie remembers how reticent his dad got every time they went to her house for the mandatory holiday visits.
I noticed the same thing. He was quiet, and he tolerated.
He never referred to her as Mom. It was always that woman or Mother.
And then Charlie found this.
And a little bit of courtesy would go a long way, which I have seen part of that tonight.
Well, that goes both ways.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So it's something you have to
If you were nice to
learn.
your mother, we'd get along so much better.
Mother, I am nice to you.
Still my house, no matter what.
I know, Mother. You keep on reminding me every time I
And you
turn
will
around.
remind somebody else when you have done what we have done. Hello, Greg, is that you, statue?
I actually suggested Dad take the tape recorder with him. She had attacked him physically. He came home, and he had scratch marks right around his neck from her. She had just dug her nails in and scratched.
Every time he tries.
For a split second, it's like Charlie has his answer. But all he's really done is move the question back a generation. If she made him this way, what made her?
She was angry. She was bitter. She was a victim because she had a terrible childhood. Dale's father was a tyrant. She told a story well after Dad was gone. I don't think he ever knew this one, about when she was 8 years old. Her father was cutting up some kind of cured meat, and he just grabbed her and took the knife that he had and just went straight down in her arm, stabbed right through. And she showed me the scar, but didn't realize that she was doing the same thing to her own children.
Not really knowing that at the beginning and the level of abuse that she endured, I don't think she could have been anything but dysfunctional.
A pattern starts to emerge. But rather than see how far back it goes, Charlie focuses back on himself. When Charlie was a kid, he wasn't living in an abusive household. He was just trying to avoid another visit to the airstrip with his dad. His dad, who was only trying in his own naive and awkward way to just spend time with his son. This wasn't Greg failing. This was Greg trying. He just kind of sucked at it.
You bring what you know to parenting. So if you were raised with a set of values, that's what you know, and that's where you start.
A cycle of abuse echoing from Dale's father to her to him left Greg hard and bitter. But at some point, he made a decision.
No, I didn't say I loved you every day.
So it doesn't get tied up.
I was busy doing diapers.
All right, I'm done.
He was going to stop it from going any further.
I'm dressing up for my daughter's birthday. Get the wide ankle going to get this shape. It's fine. You want to watch me brush my teeth?
Sure. We were very aware of what your dad grew up with, what his parents grew up with, but we had a rule. It ends here. So it's not going to happen again. That our children aren't going to be raised with those values, so that their children won't be raised with those values.
And after all those years Charlie spent avoiding him, Greg still supported Charlie's filmmaking ambitions.
It was one of his dreams to see a credit, like all by itself on the big screen, that read, directed by Charlie Tyrrell. He just wanted to see that, but he felt very confident he would see that. He would have been your biggest champion.
And Charlie wasted all that time at the airfield hiding out in the car, like he wasted so much time combing through his dad's crap, clinging on to VHS porno tapes like they were part of this puzzle. But Greg was never defined by what he carried with him. He was defined by what, after multiple generations, he was finally able to let go. His loving and devoted wife, who would have happily spent the rest of her life with him.
When I die, all I ask of you is that you take my ashes and mix them with Dad's, but I just want us to be together.
His son Jeff, now father to his own perfect, impossible kids.
I gotta go.
His daughter Meg, who shares his stubbornness, if nothing else.
You're not putting me in the movie.
And his youngest son Charlie, the one who thought his dad could be a dick sometimes, who felt like there always was, and now always will be, a distance between them. But he still ends every single movie he makes the same way, even though his dad will never see it. A single credit, all by itself, that reads,